a picture.
Just for a second, just standing.
So strong.
I can feel in the center.
And then you as well? Yeah.
I used to have a cardboard in my office saying, do you want to talk to the manager?
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of all participants, I would like to welcome this panel of distinguished policy makers to continue our discussion about feminist foreign policy. We live in a world where conflict can come unexpectedly. We can plan development, but it's very, very difficult to plan for the disruption of the international order, and this obviously poses a challenge to policymakers in nation states, but also in European institutions and also in multilateral institutions. I think now it's probably even more difficult than when we started to plan the conference to take stock of progress and to take stock of the challenges which are ahead of us collectively, but especially those who would like to deal with these international questions, problems, issues, challenges, sometimes tragedies, from their seats as a decision maker in different institutions. I think we don't need a long introduction, but I would like to introduce the panelists who will speak about this very complex landscape which is around us in development ideas, but conflicting situations at the same time. On my right is Minister Svenja Schulze, who is a federal minister for economic cooperation and development from Germany. On my left is Arantxa González Laya, who is a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain, and also a former Executive Director of the International Trade Center. On her left is Helena Fritzon, a member of the European Parliament and at the same time Vice President of the Socialists and Democrats. And together with us, also representing the European Commission, Chiara Adamo, who is head of Unit, Gender Equality, Human Rights and Democratic Governance of DG Infra of the Commission. And also with us online, Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, who is the president of the 73rd session of the UN General Assembly and former Minister of Foreign Affairs, of National Defense, and also coordinating Minister of Natural and Cultural Heritage of Ecuador. Let me welcome you all. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to start with this panel with you. And first of all, I would like to ask Minister Schulze to share with us a few thoughts from your position, from your perspective in Berlin.
Yep. Thank you very much. And I need to make it on. Yes. Now it should work. Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to applaud Friedrich Ebert Foundation for bringing us together, for having launched these feminist foreign policy progressive voices collective. Hard to speak, but it is so important to have such a collective, to have such a coming together with all the progressive voices. So your conference title states that we need to walk the talk. We've seen that a few minutes ago. And I think that is absolutely true. We need to walk the talk. And people are still discriminated against and marginalized, whether on the basis of their gender or on the basis of their sexual orientation, of disability, or age, or ethnicity, or religious regions. And global crises such as climate change, food insecurity, and violent conflicts are exacerbating these existing inequalities and are hitting women particularly hard. So there are transnational anti-gender movements that is growing, And that is a movement that is very well funded, and we should ask who is funding this movement. That is, I think, a very, very important discussion. Currently, not one single country in the world is set to achieve real equality by 2030. Not one. Not a single country in the world. And by achieving equality is the only way to get the 2030 agenda back on track. We need to advance feminist development policy in order to achieve equal participation by all people in social, in political, in economic life. And gender equality has a particular transformative power, which is why we will place it at the top of the international agendas. I would therefore like to congratulate everyone involved in bringing us together here today for launching this collective again. And you may know Germany is pursuing a feminist development policy that is human rights based, that is gender transformative, that is intersectional, and that reflects discriminatory power dynamics both within our own system and globally. And this is a question of justice. The term feminist, we just discussed that a minute before, that includes the element of a transformation and that recognize gender inequality as a deeply rooted injustice. And that is why if you call something feminist, you get a lot of reaction, mostly emotional, because everybody knows that is the aim is to overcome existing structural causes of inequality. And not everybody is convinced that that is needed, as we are convinced that that is needed. But we cannot achieve this change alone. In view of the global anti-gender movement that I already mentioned, we are actively strengthening feminist development policy on a multilateral level, through international alliances, in particular in the framework of the European Union. We need to come together with strong allies and build feminist networks. We need to join our forces. We need to have these alliances. And in this spirit, I founded a high-level informal network of like-minded female leaders in the last year. I did that together with Anne Tvinnereim from Norway, with Ngozi Okoye-Iweala from the World Trade Organization, with Kristalina Georgieva from the International Monetary Fund, and many, many others. And we just decided to joining our forces to create visibility, to set the agenda just in talking to each other before meetings and having the same points that we raise in the meetings. We decided that we will set decisive topics such as social protection, the role of women as agents of change, the education of women and girls, and female leadership in climate policy and finance. And we do that in every meeting where we are together. And we do a picture in the beginning so that everybody is seeing us. That is important. And we do that in our announcement, in our speeches. And change also needs a strong foundation that we can build on. Our National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, as well as the EU Gender Action Plan 3, that are really important milestones in shaping a feminist development policy. So that is to talk about, but what that means? What means that in having a ministry, and what means that in concrete action? I decided that we, in the BMZ, in my ministry, by 2025, will commit at least 93% of all our new projects funds to activities that promote gender equality. In our third National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, we have explicitly committed to expanding the portfolio for the implementation of Women, Peace and Security agenda. As part of the Team Europe team, we do a lot in that. We can discuss that later. As part of the Germany's G7 presidency in 2022, the German government also committed an ambitious agenda in the area of gender equality. And for the first time, the term feminist development policy was anchored in the development ministers' communique. Not an easy discussion, to tell you the truth. And only last month, Germany, together with the UN, launched the We the Women campaign at the SDG summit in New York. And this campaign will engage women worldwide in shaping collective solutions because women, girls, and marginalized groups are decisive agents for social change, justice, and equality. The multilateral approach of our feminist development policy also welcomes and strives for close collaboration with feminist civil society at both as at national and international level. And we collaborate closely with civil society, for instance, in the Generation Equality Forum, a global multi-stakeholder initiative for the acceleration of SDG 5. And to promote a gender justice transition, we cooperate with the organization Women Engaged for a Common Future, working on better representation of women in climate negotiations and on gender-just climate solutions. And we particularly value the perspective and the immense knowledge of our partners in the Global South. And that is why we involved them in the development of our African strategy, as well as in our feminist development policy strategy. And these are all important steps, but we still have a long way to go to reach our common goals of equal participation by all people in social, in political, in economic life, and achieving equality and justice for all is the only way to get this 2030 agenda back on track. We can see that the anti-gender movement is gaining traction, including in Europe, and this makes it all the more urgent for us to join forces to accelerate progress on gender equality. And the Feminist Foreign Policy Progressive Voice Collective is a way to learn from each other, to reflect on our own position in the processes, and to support women and also marginalized groups in claiming their rightful place at the table where the decisions are being made. So let us work together. I think that is what is needed in the discussions. I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Schulze. I would like to turn to Arantxa, who has worked in multilateral institutions and also focusing on economics, but at the same time social progress. How do you see the connection between the two?
Thank you. Let me start with all of us having a thought for the many women and girls in Palestine and in Israel that are at the forefront of this huge backlash that we're seeing against women and girls worldwide, but which for them is very real because they are battling, they are now on the forefront of this battle. I wanted to start there because I want to start where Svenja left it. There is a big backlash on the agenda for equal rights for women and girls. And the question we have to ask ourselves is how we are going to push against the backlash. In my life, let's say, as you said, I've been navigating international economics and being at the forefront of efforts to put more women in international trade with a very strong She Trades movement. I follow the footsteps of my sister Anne Linde with a feminist foreign policy in Spain. I'm now building an institute for feminist transformations in Cianspo, and I've never been more worried. Because I can see how now, after a period where we were making progress, we are moving backwards. It hurts when I see in the UN negotiations on the Summit for the Future, the rights of women and girls be traded against I don't know what other clause in the text. So what can we do is the question. So here's a few ideas. First, we need to make this a universal agenda, not the agenda of women working with women for women. It has to be an universal agenda, not women in the north or women in one part of the world, but women and girls and other forms of discrimination, not just women and girls. But since we are on the feminist foreign policy, this has to be a universal agenda. We have a problem with women and girls because we have a problem with universal agendas. This is what the UN stands for, and this is why the UN is under pressure today, because we have a huge difficulty in finding universal causes that unite all of us. So our first task is to make this a universal agenda. I think the second task is to make sure that nice words, lofty objectives, get ingrained into structures, into laws, into institutions that will help with anchoring, not moving backwards. We are missing a big piece in all of this, which is why I'm happy that Chiara is here. We need an EU feminist foreign policy. And we need it because we need to anchor the policies that many of us are driving in our respective remits to be anchored at the European level. And this is why I think for the next election, the next European election, we have to campaign very strongly for a EU feminist foreign policy that permeates what we will do with our development, which permeates what we will do on our foreign policy instruments, which will permeate in how we will also organize ourselves as in our different departments and what kind of representation we have. Thirdly, we need to invest more in accountability mechanisms. We need to be able to measure a little bit better what's happening or what's not happening, because that's how we know where to push. So that, in my view, is what we have ahead of us. It's not easy because the backlash is very big, is very well organized. It's a confluence of politics, religion, extremism, all of this coming together very nicely in the name of, values, conservative values, family values, religious values. So that's what we have to push against the push on feminism.
Thank you. And thank you for pointing out the important role of the European Union, but that brings us to the European Parliament, which of course is an institution that is capable of setting the agenda, representing the citizens of the European countries. Helen, how do you see these questions from your seat?
Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm honored to be here together with all the excellent speakers, and it's really an important issue to discuss together. And of course, we must start in the world, the situation in the world. With the Russian war against Ukraine and all the pictures on the ongoing conflict in Israel, Palestine, on Gaza, and also I will add the climate crisis, because we can see that together this means that we have this backlash. It means that we can see that the goals for SDGs and the human rights, we cannot see the result we wanted, because now we have this very, very bad situation in the world. So during this crisis and the conflicts, if it's pandemic or it's humanitarian crisis, we can see that women are always hit harder. Women and children are always hit harder. And this is proportionately affecting is not okay. We need to lift up this issue all the time. I can see it in the European Parliament, because when we are working with legislation, and you know, we need to have more money to our member states, and we need to have urgent legislation and all the sanctions against Russia. Some of us can see that we need to act extra, because we need to lift up the situation for women and children. So in all the political areas, we need to take the fight for gender equality and gender equality, because it's basic if we want to see result for all the citizens. For example, when we discussed all this support we need to have to the Ukrainian refugees, mostly women and children, we saw directly that we need to propose a child package, because that was really an important discussion, because children, they are living just now, and it's their childhood, even if they are living in this special situation. So they need to play, they need to read, they need to that we take care on them in all these situations. So we need to act. And I will say, as a Swede, and also a former colleague to two very famous colleagues in the Swedish government. First, Margot Wallström, our former foreign minister. She took the initiative with this feminist foreign policy, and then to Ann Linde, because you took the responsible for doing this, because it's two-step. The first step is to introduce it and say this is really important. And you know, maybe you have heard Margot and also Anne spoke about this, the 3R. The 3R about women's rights, representation, and resources. Because if you act among this 3R, then you can see result, and you have done a marvelous job, Anne, because this is really important that we do it in all the member states, and we do it together, and we also that we have the same, let me say, the same wording, the same language. Then I think it's easier to reach what we want to reach, and it's not if you say you are feminist. In Sweden 20 years ago, it was a little bit, oh, I don't want to speak to you because I don't know. But today, if you say that you are not a feminist in Sweden, people get angry. Yes, so that's a good result, because we have reached this, that we have a common language for this important work with women's rights. So. As vice president in the S&D group, when I started my office in 2019, and in my portfolio, I have I'm responsible for gender equality. So I took the initiative to have a common position paper for gender equality in our S&D family, because then we have there in our political family a common structure, a common language, and we know what to do. And I always say that we need to do it in all political areas. It's not especially for the FAM committee or another committee in the European Parliament. It's for all committees. We must do it in the budget, we must do it with gender mainstreaming, we must do it in all political areas. Otherwise, we will not have the result as we want. So we have a long way to go. It's a very important work, especially in these times. And I look forward to the discussion here. And I can say that I fully agree with you. We need this policy on the European level. So thank you for that. It's a really good proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it was very good to hear that there is some progress in thoughts and social attitudes in different countries, especially in the north, but hopefully not only in the north. But why don't we now widen the perspective and go to the level of the UN and ask Maria Fernanda Espinosa to comment on these questions of progress, at least in thinking, but also the high risk of backlash in our reality.
Thank you very much. I just want to check if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Oh, okay. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you in person as I had planned. And thank you to the Foundation for European Progressive Studies and the Ever Foundation for bringing us together to discuss an issue, as was already mentioned, an issue that is absolutely critical, especially if we look at the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and human rights standards. And I'm really happy and celebrate the creation of these Progressive Voices Collective. I think it's extremely timely and much needed. So, because it's very clear that we need a gender approach, perspective, method, policy that connects the needs and rights of women with diplomacy and the dynamics of the international system and international cooperation and development. I am sure that you have extensively discussed these during the morning session. In basically, as you said it very well, especially the moderator, we are facing major global challenges. We are living in a world of multiple and compounded crises, ecological, security crisis, poverty, inequalities, and the lack of progress, I think, is on SDGs is universal. But the poorest and the most vulnerable bear the greatest burden. And among them, of course, we know women and girls pay the highest price in all of this. We have seen with great concern from the last SDGs report that we are significantly off track. The slow pace and even regression in areas due to COVID, to the war in Ukraine, they have caused important setbacks in poverty eradication, in gender equality and education, hunger, you name it. And we have gone backwards in the hard-won development gains in the last decade. So you said it also well, women's rights are under increased threat globally. Progress has stalled and even reversed in more than 30% of the SDGs. Progress on 50% of the targets is insufficient, and only 12% of the targets in the Sustainable Development Goals are on track. Only 12%. We see that the Global South, the so-called Global South, in all its diversity and complexity, but really looking at a global financial architecture that is outdated and unfair, failing to uphold women's rights and gender equality. A recent UN Women report highlights that a significant funding gap and the need for an additional investment of $360 billion every year to meet the gender targets by 2030. And however, if we look at the composition of bilateral aid, for example, less than 4% is dedicated to gender-centric programs. And the support we see internationally is what we call erratic and unsustainable. We have also looked at the gender snapshot in 2023, which estimates that if the existing trends persist, approximately 340 million women and girls, around 8% of the global female population around the world, are projected to live in extreme poverty by 2030. And when we look at political representation, it was already mentioned many times, that we continue to be underrepresented in all fronts, in parliaments, in cabinets, in local governments, in the private sector, and in the international system, especially in high-level positions. And when we look at peace and security and armed conflicts, evidence show that women and girls take heavier toll from armed conflict settings. In conflict and post-conflict countries, we see the highest sexual violence rates, where different forms of gender-based violence are used as weapons of war. And yet, women also play a critical and essential role in peacekeeping, in conflict prevention, in peace negotiations. And I think Arantxa mentioned at the beginning, we are seeing it in front of our eyes these days, where almost 500,000 women and girls have been displaced from their homes in Gaza, and close to 100 households are new female-headed after the death of their husbands. And this is only in the past 10 days. That's why feminist foreign policies are so much needed in this, to respond to this very bleak scenario. Because feminist foreign policies, as we know, place women as agents of societal transformation, as examples, as they are, of resilience, of capacity and power, and just not as mere victims or recipients of aid. But the question here is feminist foreign policy useful? How are the responses in countries that have feminist foreign policies? How is the investment? Is it more effective, more responsive? Has the situation of women and girls improved because of a feminist perspective and a feminist foreign policy? For example, in all international efforts, not only on peace and security, but in trade, in diplomacy, in development assistance, in migration, in climate action. I think, as Arantxa mentioned, we strongly and urgently need to measure accountability and transparency mechanisms for feminist foreign policy. We know at the same time that it's a very important tool. It's a very important toolkit. We heard that achieving gender equality is sort of a precondition for achieving the whole Agenda 2030. But we need more. We need more investment, more political will, more leadership, more action on the ground to fight the climate crisis, poverty, transactional inequalities. We need to use this feminist toolkit to transform and improve the international system. So just to close, some of the critical issues that we need to deploy when using what we call a feminist foreign policy. In other countries, there are feminist foreign policies, but perhaps they don't have that label or that name. And we have to understand that feminist foreign policies are not monolithic, and there is no one size fits all. There are no the same needs and challenges in developing countries that in the countries of the global north. But of course, feminist foreign policy should help to bridge, to establish a dialogue, to exchange experiences. So I mentioned that we need to, for example, in very concrete terms, when looking at feminist foreign policies in Europe, I agree that ideally we should have a European feminist foreign policy, but we need it for better gender-sensitive international cooperation, for ODA, overseas development assistance, when we operate and think about the reform of the international financial architecture, when we think about debt relief packages, climate finance, etc., etc. We know that gender-responsive budgeting, allocating resources effectively, etc., is extremely, extremely important to achieve not only SDG 5, but the SDGs as a whole body. And I think that it is clear that any reform of the international system whether it is the financial architecture, but the governance structures for climate, for development, for peace and security. You know, any new global governance design cannot be gender blind. It should be women-led. And this also needs to come hand in hand with better representation of women in the international system. Our own Global Women Leaders flagship report found that since 1945, for example, women have held leadership roles in only 20% of the world's largest multilateral organizations, and 13 of these organizations have never been led by a woman. So there's a long way to go. We need also better data, clear baselines to compare for the accountability part. We need better gender discrete data. We need clarity, as I mentioned, in the baselines to measure progress and implementation, to see how effective feminist foreign policies are. We need to invest in gender-sensitive statistical capacity and data literacy. And this is critical not only to see the performance of feminist foreign policies, but for achieving the sustainable development goals. The support to feminist movements worldwide is critical. We know that some of the changes come from the pressure, the influence of the feminist movements on these very critical issues. Advancing gender equality and implementing feminist foreign policies require the support of the feminist movement the world over. So I agree with those who have already said that we need actions and not only words. Labeling a policy as feminist isn't enough. It must address these very structural concerns effectively. I think that feminist foreign policy goes beyond prescriptions and norms. It is a method, a perspective, a political standpoint in foreign policy. And I think that, as mentioned, and I would like to end with that, we do not have and perhaps should not have a single monolithic definition of a feminist foreign policy, since it can vary according to particular regional context, different priorities, etc. No? But I think that it is critical that we look at the impact of feminist foreign policy in the well-being and empowerment of women and the advancement of gender equality. And I think that to make the case for its usefulness, and this is absolutely vital in these times where we are experiencing, as you already mentioned, significant setbacks and regression in hard-won gains in the rights and dignity of women the world over. So I really wish a long, productive, and creative road ahead to this Progressive Voices Collective. And thank you, and over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. And I would like to apologize for the technical disruption. We heard you well, Minister Espinosa. Unfortunately, your picture is just coming back after the second minute. We couldn't see you, but we heard you very, very clearly. You also called for a strong European feminist foreign policy, and that's a very good transition to the representative of the European Commission, who is with us, Chiara Adamo. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this invitation. And before I start, I would like to convey the greetings also from our Commissioner, Uta Urpilainen. As you know, she's a close ally of yours in this endeavor. I don't need to dwell on gender backlash. The previous panelist really eloquently spoke about it, and unfortunately, indeed, we see regressions almost on all SDG 5 indicators, and inequalities have been compounded by a series of factors and crises. However, I'd like, as the last speaker of the panel, to end on a more positive note, on a more hopeful note, because as we heard from the speakers today, we have glimpses of hope. We have at least 12 countries who currently apply a feminist lenses in their foreign policy. 6 of them are EU member states. I believe they also were very much inspired by Sweden, of course, as a front runner, but these are indeed Germany, Spain, but also Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Slovenia, and France. And then we have others outside the European Union. I think the interesting trend is that 8 of these countries enter into this endeavor, this feminist foreign policy movement, only in the last 2 years. So we really see an interesting progression there. So from the EU perspective, of course, we are observing this with a lot of interest. And indeed, I believe that this really is an interesting response and a needed response to the backlash and to the anti-gender, anti-rights movement who are very vocal out there. We heard from the previous speaker that indeed there is no one single monolithic feminist foreign policy, simply because every country has its own priorities, traditions, understandings of the concept. However, there is, I believe, a shared ambition among all, and the shared ambition is really to address and attack unbalanced power structures, root causes of discrimination, intersectionality, and really increase accountability, be able to measure lasting and sustainable results for gender equality. So it's really about, I believe, in terms of commonality, putting gender equality at the center of whatever we do, and have equality in all senses as a reflex. So thank you for that. And indeed, at the EU level, we have already an ambitious roadmap, the EU Gender Action Plan 2020-2025. It is anchored around 3 key principles: the human rights-based approach, intersectionality, and gender transformative agenda. So let's say that we have a good start there. And it did indeed has been changing the way we operated at the EU level. Today I will focus on 4 points because we just received the results of our midterm evaluation. We are midterm on the Gender Action Plan GAP 3. And by the end of November, I hope we will be able to send to you ministers in the Council, but also to MEPs in the European Parliament, the midterm report by the Commission and the HRVP, really also presenting ideas on way forward. So this discussion for me is extremely timely. So the first point and the first lesson of the evaluation was that the GAP 3 brought the strategic importance of gender equality and women empowerment throughout external actions much more in the forefront at the EU level. It encouraged multilateral steps taken by the EU and its member states. The fact that we had this clear political agenda in multilateral settings. Take the Committee on the Status of Women, take also the Generation Equality Forum and the leading role that we have played on Gender-Based Violence Action Coalition, but also yourself in other action coalitions. So I think it really comforted us in being bold and go out there at the multilateral level. But also one lesson learned from the previous period was that we needed to ensure action at country level. And there we came up with the idea of a country-level implementation plan on GAP 3 for delegations to translate alongside member states with Team Europe and consulting civil society, women rights organization, government partners in different countries, come up with their own contextualized agenda for gender equality based on a gender country profile. So I think one lesson from this first midpoint is we need really to contextualize, to localize, to be able to really respond and tailor our political priorities on the ground. And I hope this also helped a number of delegations to step up the coordination role alongside EU, member states' embassies in countries, because it's about programs, it is also about political démarches, and really speak with one voice. There we had excellent example. We have more timid examples, so wait for November to go into details, but we really see this as an important step. The second point is resources, and we learn from the best. And thanks, I would say, also to the Council and the European Parliament, we introduced an ambitious target, a numerical target, as you know. We are not as ambitious as the Germans, but we set 85%, which is already quite challenging, 85% of all our external actions should be either gender responsive or gender transformative. And this is not new. This is a target that we have had for a number of years, but with the novelty, it is now firmly anchored in our financial gender Global Europe regulation and in the GAP 3, and we saw a progression. 2022, we are at average all the external relations DG at 72%. INPA, we do better. But average 72%, which is, I think, quite extraordinary, leap forward. And I think the lesson there is we need, unfortunately, to advance target. And this pushes the whole machine. One target on which we are not yet there is the percentage of actions and programs that are that have gender as a principal objective. In the jargon G2 action, so whose main principal objective is gender equality and action on gender-based violence. On that, we set a target of 5%, and we are still not there, but we are working on it. Gender mainstreaming is a key way of operating, of course, and there the focus is really addressing the non-traditional sectors. When we do Global Gateway, when we do infrastructure, submarine cables, hydrogen plants, you name it, all of this as you can have a gender lenses in all of this. And that's what we are working on, particularly with the IFIs, the international financial institutions. We see really an opening there. And if I compare to where we were 2-3 years ago, also a number of these actors have embraced gender equality also as a business case. So the EIB, the EBRD, and others. So we are working with the IFIs to really make sure that what we do on innovative investments, on lending, on guarantees, is gender responsive. So a lot of lessons to share also with your teams, but something that we need to bring together as EU. And a third, you name it, the feminist movements, grassroots movements, civil society, that's where we need to put the resources, nothing about them without them. That's a commitment in GAP 3. We increased in the last year some 27% of the funds. Still, we need to do more. At the ANGA, we announced together with UN Women a new commitment on a new program, ACT, which is about indeed reinforcing global and regional networks of feminist organizations so that they can receive direct funding to carry out their action. And very last word, I see that I'm out of time. You need to walk the talk, but also you need to lead by example. So one important chapter of this GAP 3 was to ensure that all through our chain, and starting from our top, from our leaders, from our managers, we embed gender-responsive leadership in the institution. It's a real institutional shift. I copied it from the German GIZ methodology, just for you to be aware. It's allowed. It's allowed. And with the help of the Swedish and the Folke Bernadotte, we enrolled our managers in gender-responsive leadership trainings. At the end of this training, they need to come up with a very concrete action plan and show how, as leaders, as managers, they are carrying forward this agenda. I think this is very promising. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to echo the word ambition, and I think we need to acknowledge, if not celebrate, that the European Commission in this cycle has been really ambitious in the field of gender equality. A lot of progress has been made, not only symbolic, but also in the very substance of the policies. So there is now something which needs to be built on and to be continued. As I said the word continue, I would like to beg for some more minutes for the discussion, because we started with a few minutes delay, and I believe we are allowed to have a short round of Q&A session, because we heard so many inspirational interventions. We have 2 microphones in the room. This is a technical information, and I believe the 2 microphones can be delivered to the members of the audience who raise their hands now. The colleague here will start, and there is 1, 2 over there. I suggest that because we are a little bit short of time, we collect all the questions. If you can, please introduce yourself very briefly and also tell to whom you would like to send your question.
Thank you very much. I agreed with a majority of what everyone said. My name is Peymana Assad. I am the co-founder of the Labour Foreign Policy Group. We are trying to push the UK Labour Party towards more progressive thinking on foreign policy issues. Because there was so much discussion around how we put a lot of this stuff in practice, I want to link what we're talking about to the global south, specifically Afghanistan, because I work a lot with Afghan women and girls groups who are advocating for their rights in Afghanistan. I've written my question out because I just want to be very clear and concise. The rights of women and girls are always sacrificed in political deals. The biggest example of this is the Doha deal signed by the US government with the Taliban. I mention this because the EU and the UN are the only ones represented on the ground. They are doing their own deals with the Taliban, the EU and the UN, the Taliban who ban women and girls from work and school, to allow women to work in EU and UN-run Western programs, but Afghan-run programs are not allowed the same deals. This should be a universal agenda that unites us, that there is this country run by UN-recognized terrorists doing deals with multilateral entities that goes against the basis of our values on UN and EU charters on human rights and equal opportunities. Yet we allow the Taliban to use excuses, such as religion and culture, as a reason not just to limit Afghan women and girls, but they use state apparatus to do it. It seems to me we are okay with that because we don't know how to argue against those who use religion and culture as an excuse to enact a gender apartheid regime. So, and we do this in the name of international development. How do we do this in practice?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the question is clear. I saw 2 more hands beforehand on the left side.
Hello, thank you. My name is Marilena Grunewald and I work for EPLO, the European Peacebuilding Liaison Office. My question is about the budget cuts in development and peace funding. This is not only something that the German government is facing, but I think many European countries. And my question is really how we face this rising security and defense costs and how we operate with these restraining conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Lena Füting. I work in the mediation, peacebuilding, feminism field. And my question concerns the aspect of how to anchor the feminist agenda or the gender action, so to say, structurally, because it was mentioned a couple of times that that's a very important aspect, and I agree with that. And this at the beginning of the year, I worked at the Parliament, the European Parliament, in the context of a Schumann traineeship, and there I also had a chance to do a workshop for Expo staff, DG Expo staff, on how to integrate gender equality better in external action. And something that also came to light there is that when it comes to planning and executing the external policy missions, so far, at least I'm not aware of it, there's no sort of, say, formal framework or formal markers that sort of guidelines that can sort of play a role when planning and executing, sort of something to like institutionalize and formalize the different goals that want to be achieved, both sort of internally and externally when on mission. Who is spoken with, who goes, what impact do the actions have that are planned? Sort of, I guess, an all-around step tracing, sort of, and when it comes to planning and then after the monitoring and evaluation. And equally, as on the EU level, I would be interested in how that is done in Germany, in the German feminist development policy goals, and also maybe you also have something to say about that, how exactly that is measured and secured that it is gone through with in the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No more yellow hands. Oh, just one more. Okay, the gentleman.
Thank you. I'm Luca Brocca from Just Access. I had a question regarding the EU feminist foreign policy, the possibility of making a common foreign policy. My concern, the thing I was thinking about, is the situation that we have in 3 states, in Poland, Hungary, and now even in Italy, that controversially with the first woman prime minister, now we're going a little backwards, it seems, with feminist foreign policy. And we see a lot that we talk about being about accommodating diversity, about being united in diversity, but there seems, especially in this field, to be a little too much diversity to actually harmonize this field. So would you say that this is something realistic to do, something realistic? Because as the minister said, she talked about the fact that equality will never be reached by 2030 in any country. And this is true, and I feel like a common EU feminist foreign policy might never be reached. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You forgot to mention that Hungary also has the first female head of state, which is also a big progress, if we don't count the Habsburgs. Look, my suggestion is that we give back the floor to all speakers for 1 or 2 minutes. I think there's been an interesting question raised probably for everybody. Who would like to start? If nobody, then we go to the original order, no? Or the reverse order? Commission starts.
No, thank you. Look, on the measurement and the formal markers, how do we measure, how do we ensure accountability, how do we measure the goals, etc. I mean, I can speak for 2 hours, but I will just say it in one sentence. We have a very stringent quality review system, so every action document goes through review. All of our project officers need to explain how the action is gender responsive, whether there is a specific sub-objective, how much, etc. So we follow the OECD DAC marker methodology. Just to, okay. And then when we adopted the GAP3, we ensured to, in annex, to adopt a staff working document which really puts all the different indicators that need to be used in our actions, and we made sure that these indicators were anchored to the SDG 5 indicators. So, because the ambition is really being able to then measure, eventually, you know, whether our actions really have an impact in contributing to fulfilling these SDG 5 indicators. But it's easier said than done. It requires time and a lot of efforts. So that was for the technical question to our technical person in the panel. No. If I then venture on Afghanistan, but I'm sure the minister will complement. We're actually quite proud that we have a very brave woman, Rafaela Iodice, as the EU attaché in Afghanistan. She's probably one of the only ones in Kabul, and thank God she's there, because she's doing a fantastic job. There have been recently 2 earthquakes. I don't think anybody in his good mind would think that the EU should not provide humanitarian aid and leave people of Afghanistan alone. As far as cooperation is concerned, our conditions are very, very stringent, and we said from the beginning we stopped everything, and we will only provide cooperation funds, for instance, on education, if this can be ensured in a way that is women for women, and not through the government authorities, but through civil society and the UN. So we are very, very wary of that, and also in a strict dialogue with the United Nations to ensure that everything is done according to what also the Council of Ministers indicated we should do. On that's one for you on the German. On whether it is realistic to have a EU a feminist foreign policy, I think, you know, when we come out with a midpoint gender action plan, that could be maybe a good opportunity to initiate a discussion with our member states to see where they wanna go. And what matters is also going beyond the words. The Gender Action Plan is based on principles which are very much anchored on what you defined as feminist foreign policy, and it did not get approval by the 27 in the Council. We have presidency conclusions by 24 member states who are behind us, who implemented the GAP3 roadmap. There are 3 who decided not to do it. So the situation is not very easy. There is no consensus, but we have 24 member states with us working.
Well, let's not underestimate the Belgian presidency, which is coming next, before Hungary and Poland take over. Should we go back to the United Nations? Minister Espinosa, did you hear some questions which would trigger some answers from you?
Well, thank you. I hope the camera works better this time. Most of the questions were addressed to the European context. From my side, what I can say is that it's really good news, how seriously the European Union is taking the issue of accountability, of monitoring. And I think it would be wonderful that these methodologies and these efforts on these 85% target could be shared with other parts of the world, including my part of the world in Latin America. And the second issue is that any accountability and acceleration of implementation of SDG 5 and the entire Agenda 2030, I think should be the accountability methodologies, the data, the comparability should also be connected to the SDG accountability frameworks. So we can have a universal mechanism to monitor and cross-correct in cases that it's needed. The issue of financing, I think it's critical to really turn words into deeds on feminist foreign policy. And I heard a question about the cuts in development assistance, in the peace agenda, and compared to increases in budgets of defense, for example. And I don't think Germany is the only case. Perhaps it's the case in other European countries. And this is something that needs to be discussed and should be part of the conversation in the conversations and negotiations with the developing world. We are approaching COP28 in a few weeks. Climate finance, for example, is something that is a trust-building opportunity. And climate finance, the 100 billion of the Green Climate Fund, the Loss and Damage Fund, are ways to restore trust, to establish a conversation with the so-called Global South, but it is also to use feminist foreign policy in very concrete areas of work and areas of cooperation and collaboration. And of course, climate finance, of course, the issue of debt restructuring, of a global tax deal, should be gender sensitive. I think this is what we have learned. So a great discussion. Thank you very much for this, and over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. Helen Fritzon, can I ask you to come in?
Thank you. Better now? Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Just two short comments. First, about the discussion about planning. I think it's really important to underline that we need a really good cooperation between the different levels in the society, the local level, the regional level, the national level, the international level. I can see it. I have many years behind me as a I'm as a former mayor in a city, and I know very well that we need to have this good cooperation to protect, of course, in some issues, the national competencies, to see them and to take this on board in the parliament where I work. But we need more cooperation between the different levels. And just one remark about, is it realistic that we can reach this feminist foreign policy on the European Union level? I can compare it with two things. The first one is that in 2019, I entered the parliament and we had no gender equality strategy in the European Union. So it was a very clear demand from our socialist family, our group, for voting for the Commission. We said we must have this. She must promise that we will take the decision about a gender equality strategy. It wasn't easy, but we have it, and it's very, very useful. The other example is from our political family. As I said before, I took the initiative with a position paper in our family. Now we have one. And you can maybe imagine it's not easy to discuss a common line about prostitution, for example, a common line about surrogacy, to mention two very, very sensitive issues. But now we have this position paper, and that means that we can take step forward. So yes, the answer is yes. I think it's possible to have this policy on the European level because it means that we need to work together. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Arantxa González?
So on this very point, if the EU is a democratic space, then it has to be feminist. And if it is feminist, it's a demonstration that we are a democracy. Now, what we cannot do is go around saying that we are a big, strong democracy and not act as if we were one. So this is a matter of democracy. So if it is a matter of democracy, let's make it a matter of democracy. In the next parliamentary elections, we make this, like we made last time, climate change, we make this an issue for the elections. Yes. And let citizens decide if this is about democracy or not. I think it's worth trying. Second, on mediation, is about having women at the table, not just on the menu. Yes. There is a resolution for the UN. There is a resolution that has the mechanisms in place, that has the budgeting in place, that has the mechanics in place. So what we can do and what you can do on the ground is push for these mechanisms to be used every time. There's been a few instances, like let me give you the example of Libya, where I pushed a lot, and it worked. So we also have to take this mechanism seriously, which is why I like mechanisms, because once you have them, it's much easier than just shouting in the void. All you are saying is, Resolution 1325, please put it in action. Yeah. So I think we are coming to the conclusion that it is much better to invest in prevention, invest in dialogue, invest in mediation, than it is to invest in remedying the enormous problems that come with wars and conflict. So that's also a good way to use our development assistance a bit more purposeful. You don't need a lot, but you can put more into prevention, remedy, mediation efforts, into the diplomacy part of the foreign policy work that in the end will help you save a lot of money down the road.
Thank you very much. Minister Schulze, you have the final word.
Yeah, thank you very much. You ask how it is possible to get these anchored structurally. And I think two things are needed. You need leadership, you need people who are driving that forward, who are the ministers, the head of something, that tell the people that the ones who have the money and have the saying that they want all others to be feminist. In Germany, it was the chancellor who said first that he is a feminist, and he don't understand that someone else is it not. So that is a lot of pressure for everybody to do the work in the right way. And then you need to put it in the DNA of organizations. Someone need to argue why projects do not also addresses women and girls. Why? Every project for a society need to address the whole society, and maybe there are some parts, I don't know what, but there are some parts that where only men are addressed, but the rest needs to address the whole society, needs to address women. And having a gender lens, having this perspective, that is something you need to learn. And that is something, when I was the Minister of Science, when it was my first time as a minister, my staff told me, no, there are no women that we can put on the agenda for the conference, because there is no women in that field that could give a speech or something like that. And I was laughing about that, because I can't imagine that is possible. But they take that serious. They say, no, there is no women. And I said, so then we do not take this conference, because it is not important when there is no women in that field. So addressing that in the everyday life, that is a human right. It's not about having some nice women integrated because it looks better. It is a human right, and we agreed as world that we feature this human right. It's SDG 5. Let us fight for that. And it is hard, okay? It is hard, but it is possible. And in times of budget cuts, and yes, we have budget cuts because we have a shrinking budget. If the budget as a whole is shrinking, then also my budget is shrinking. That is obvious. But that is time to fight for women and to say, okay, in this time, it is gender equality is the solution. If more women are engaged in society, if more women are employed, if more women get money to do their own business, the budget will raise again, because then it is more equality in the society. So I'm still an optimist that we are able to change these things, because I'm a social democrat. We are optimists that societies can change. That is what we work for, so let us work for it. There's such a lot of people here in the room. When you go outside and advertise for a feminist policy, so we will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the panelists and also the audience, which has been very active. I think we saw that there is European ambition. There are European champions, Sweden, Spain, Germany, and hopefully other countries will also follow. And without assuming that the world is Eurocentric, I think it's very important to ensure that we have a cooperation in multilateral institutions, but also through the European ones, to ensure that we make progress with human rights and the sustainable development goals in the interest of all, and not only Europeans. So thank you very much, and I hand back the chairing and the moderation for the last session, which is still coming.